Welcome to Rewatch and Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each episode against each other. Today's episode is Grey's Anatomy Season 4, Episode 9, Crash Into Me. Episode in a nutshell is a brief reminder of what happens in the episode. So this episode is a double-length episode, and it does have a high focus on the patient stories and less so in the drama. But the first patient that we get is one of Sloane's patients, had a tumor on his neck. The tumor was able to be removed. However, because of all of the tissue that needed to come out, there was just a very, very thin piece of skin between his carotid artery and the outside world. And so everybody gets called in at the beginning of the episode to a meeting with Sloane to be given the rundown of what to do should the artery burst and that flap of skin not hold. Lexi then spends most of the episode bonding with the patient, getting to know him. He flirts with her. She's seeing Alex, but then due to something that she finds out later in the episode, which is more on the drama side of things, she starts flirting back a little bit. But then his carotid does, in fact, end up bursting. And at first she's able to stop the bleeding. And they're trying to get him to surgery, but then he starts bleeding again, and unfortunately, the end result is that he does not make it. Then we have a man who comes in with a heart infection. He ended up with heart surgery, and the grafts that were put on his heart were infected, and this spread to his bones. So the initial surgery was to remove his chest bone to prevent the infection. However, then later in the episode, when he starts coding, they realize that the infection actually made it into his heart because it was actually his grafts that were infected. And so the surgery becomes more intensive, but they do ultimately end up saving his life. And then the main reason this is a two-part episode is the main injuries and drama surround an ambulance accident that occurs. So when the heart patient is being delivered, the ambulance that delivers him is then rammed into by another ambulance. The patients from the first ambulance are Stan and Ray. Stan, unfortunately, is unsavable, but he does manage to hold on long enough to be visited by his wife, who works in the hospital, who basically comes to say her goodbyes. Ray is his longtime partner, and he's injured, and they have to perform a minor procedure to stabilize him in the ambulance, which is what Meredith manages to do before he's brought in and he manages to survive. Then we have the other ambulance. The driver of that ambulance, Mary, she ended up having a seizure behind the wheel, which is what caused the accident, and her partner, Sean, causes a bit of a negative stir amongst the characters as he is revealed to be very prejudiced as a person. So nobody really wants to help him, but they do so because it's the law. And those are the patients for this episode. Mary is, during her surgery to fix what was causing the seizures, some of the equipment malfunctions, which ends up having to be repaired on site because Derek cannot finish the procedure without it, and he's already too far into the procedure to withdraw. Sean, he's operated on, and then they purposefully suture the wound specifically to hide his tattoo, which is what is the offensive element, and the belief system that he holds that is represented by said tattoo. So that's all of the patient stories. As for the drama, there is some drama around, obviously, Sean is a patient. Bailey, her marriage is on the rocks with Tucker because she works too much. They even arrange lunch, and because she is operating, she ends up passing messages through George back and forth, where Tucker basically is like, you choose everybody over your family. And Bailey says, like, she took an oath to save lives. That is what she is doing. And his oath was in sickness and in health. And basically, they have a proxy fight through George, and their marriage is on the rocks, which adds additional stress to Bailey's day, who originally Sean does not want her to be the one to operate, and he demands a non-colored doctor, and she decides to then go ahead and tap in Yang because she's not dark-skinned, but she's also not white. And that leads to Yang, of course, being like, you're doing the same thing because you specifically pulled her off a cardio surgery when you know she's after cardio and trying to get into Han's good books, purely based on her race, which is essentially the same judgment that the patient was doing. And then George is also pulled in because the patient refuses to consent to surgery unless there is somebody white in there with him, which is why George is then tapped in. But that is the prejudice that's going around. Then there is Rebecca, who was the amnesia patient from so long ago, who's still come back once again to visit Alex. Alex basically tells her, you don't want to talk, you have a baby, you have a husband, you're here for physical intimacy, and she's just fooling herself if she thinks she actually wants to talk to him because, he's not serious. And then he also notes that he is sleeping with Lexi. However, he does have a weakness for Rebecca to the point where he ends up sneaking her into the gallery so she can watch him operate, which Sloane realizes because, he built her face after it was crushed, so he recognizes her immediately, and this results in Alex being suspended. Additionally, Lexi is sitting next to her in the gallery, which means that she now knows that Alex is sleeping with people who are not her as well, and I don't think they're officially a couple. And he did make it clear to her before they started like their thing in a previous episode that, he wasn't interested in anything other than a physical relationship. So if Lexi thought it was more than that, that is probably her own feelings. But he was clear beforehand going into it that, he wasn't going to be the good guy. So either way, the point is he's sleeping with Lexi and then he sleeps with Rebecca too. So that's just not great. Meredith is wanting to overcome her fear and have Derek date only her. However, throughout the episode, Derek does bond a lot more with Rose, who is his temporary love interest, and she is the one who manages to fix the machine in the OR because she did 3 semesters of computer science before switching to the medical field at her previous university or college, and she and him grow closer and bond through this, ultimately kissing at the end of the surgery, which is of course now going to make things awkward. He was clear that he was planning to date other people with Meredith, but now Meredith has asked him not to after he's already gone and bonded with Rose and kissed her, so that is a foreshadow of future drama. Smaller dramas that occurred, we have Izzy and George deciding that they may not be able to make things work, not because they don't have chemistry, but because the timing was off, and maybe someday. And Lexi's invited to Christina and Meredith's dance party, which later Izzy is invited to as well, and she brings George. But I think that's everything that was significant that happened in the episode. Now that we've been reminded about the episode, it's time to rank the episode first on the mostly objective ranking list, followed by the personal ranking list. So now we come to our points. Worth 1 point each, we have our single episode supporting character introductions. We have Shane, the prejudiced patient, Stan Giamatti, the ambulance paramedic who ends up passing away, Sarah Giamatti, his wife, that works at the hospital, Mary Daltrey, who was the driver of the other ambulance that has the seizure, Jacob Nolston, the heart patient, and Nick Hanscom, the artery patient. Then we have our multi-episode supporting character development, which Ray is the only paramedic in the episode who does recur. And as a recurring paramedic, that means he's in multiple episodes, though usually in the background, but still worth 2 points instead of 1. Then we have 2 points for the supporting relationship development, which is Derek and Rose bonding with each other and then sharing a kiss after the surgery. Multi-season main character development, Alex ends up being suspended for 2 weeks due to his stunt of sneaking in Rebecca to the gallery where she is not allowed to be. And he basically, at the end of the episode, when he's confronting her, he points out that because of her, he's been suspended for 2 weeks. So that's how we know that happened. And then the main relationship development, worth 4 points as well, is Meredith saying that she doesn't want Derek dating other people. He doesn't have a chance to respond to her in this episode, so there's no negative equivalent, but just know that she does want to face her fear after seeing Ray face his fear in the ambulance, and that's why she says she doesn't want Derek dating other people. Of course, she does this after he's already kissed Rose, and so that's going to make things complicated in the future. But that's all of our positive points for this episode. We'll now start with the negative points. So, worth 2 points each, we have the negative messaging or behavior. We have the prejudiced paramedic, very negative. Karev sneaking Rebecca into the gallery, knowing that it is against the rules and she is not allowed to be there, which ultimately does end up with him being suspended. And then 2 additional points for Bailey overstepping. And I'm saying that because Bailey makes the decision, because her patient asks for a white doctor, she decides. Well, at this point, they don't realize that he is as prejudiced as he is. But the point is, like, he does not want a black doctor. So Bailey and the chief are both rejected as doctors. Like, initially, he says he doesn't want a woman doctor. So Bailey then brings the chief in. Then he says he just wants a different doctor, which of course clues them in that he does not want a black doctor. Rather than get him a white doctor as he's requesting, Bailey decides to pull Yang from the heart surgery and Han's service, which she knows that Christina's goal is cardio and that it's very important to her to be on Han's good side and to keep making progress in that direction. So to be pulled off, and only because of her skin color, because in this case, the reason Yang is chosen is because she's lighter skinned, but she's not white. So that is So Bailey basically is doing the same thing that the prejudice patient is in a different way and impacting Christina's career, which Christina does, to her credit, confront Bailey about at the end of the episode. But it is kind of overstepping her professional bounds in that sense, due to the fact that, again, she's kind of doing the same thing and impacting Christina's career negatively. Then we have -2 points for the supporting relationship regression or breakup, and that, of course, is after Lexi and Rebecca cross paths. That's when Lexi comes to realize that she and Alex are not exclusive. Then we see that Alex sleeps with Rebecca, even though he was sleeping with Lexi just like the episode before, even earlier this episode, they were kissing. Um, and then we have Izzy and George deciding that their timing is off. It's not bad chemistry, it's just the wrong time, and maybe someday. But that they're not going to be able to make it work currently in a romantic sense. Though, of course, they still love each other and are still friends. And then we have the main relationship regression or breakup, which, of course, is Bailey and Tucker's relationship falling apart. And George having to pretty much play messenger bird between them as they have a fight about the fact that Bailey is always prioritizing her job and her patients over their family. And that was -3 points. That does ultimately leave us with a 3 out of 10 for this episode. So now that we know it's a 3 out of 10, it's time to add it to our list. So on our mostly objective ranking, we have in first, The Change is Gonna Come, Physical Attraction, Chemical Reaction, Kung Fu Fighting, Love/Addiction, Haunt You Every Day, Forever Young, Let the Truth Sting. This episode comes in 8th place, Crash Into Me, and then The Heart of the Matter is in 9th. My personal ranking for this episode is, I found that a lot of the tension in this episode was built around the patients and the fact that, at least 2 of the patients were lost, which is also a rare thing. The fact that even the ones that weren't lost all had complications, which made things difficult. Like one of the reasons Bailey couldn't go and have lunch as she had planned with her husband, where they were going to talk, was because there was just a series of complications that happened once she actually got into surgery. Then the dramas were kind of more minor and background to this episode, so it really was, in the case of this episode, very much the patients that everything revolved around. And it did deal with some pretty heavy subject matter. So I thought overall it was entertaining. It was a good episode, but it did lead to some discomfort. It did lead to some tragedy. It did lead to some foreshadowing, but the drama not coming to fruition. And for that reason, I decided to ultimately give it a 4 out of 10 as my personal ranking, which puts it into 8th place on the personal list. And that then brings us to the series ranking so far. On the mostly objective ranking, we have season 1 in first place, followed by season 2 and season 3 in third. Season 4 so far has a score of 51 out of a possible 150. Then on the personal ranking side, season 3 was in first place, followed by season 2, then season 1, and season 4 has a score of 59 so far. Sorry, mostly objective ranking, it is not 51, it is 53. Yeah, it was 53. I misspoke there. So with that, we have now rewatched and ranked Grey's Anatomy Season 4, Episode 9, Crash Into Me. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.